All right, hi everyone. So we're now going to be reviewing our week 4 case study concepts. Again, as a reminder, this is just a generic concept review. I won't necessarily be going super detailed about the answers, but this is more of a guide to help you think through your responses. So the first question we're going to cover asks, which of the following can raise levels of LDL in the blood? So really we have 5 options. Diets containing animal products, genetic factors, exercise, all of the above, or E, which is A and B only. So let's really talk about the odd one out here, the one that we really know doesn't cause a rise of LDL. So again, remember your LDL is your low density lipoproteins. It is a subcategory of cholesterols. Exercise in general lowers your cholesterol. Okay, there's a wide array of mechanisms why it does this. Now, the one area where this is not true is HDL, your high density lipoproteins, the quote unquote good cholesterol. Now, it's not as simple as that, but it's always better to be higher with HDL, especially when we look at what happens with metabolic disease like diabetes, obesity, stuff like that. HDL decreases, right? Whereas all the other cholesterols, they increase. So it's really a problem when our LDL gets too high. And again, exercise really works on helping mobilize and eliminate a lot of those fatty and fat-related lipid type products in the body. And it again raises HDL, which could be an area that people get mixed up with here. The real answer, though, is going to be our other two options. We know that there is familial hypercholesterolemia that does happen from genetics. There's also individuals who have genetic diseases that increase the amount of cholesterol that the body makes. Again, cholesterol is a very important component of the body. You know, it makes up every cell membrane of our body. It's one of the most important building blocks. It's a key factor for the creation of some of our most potent hormones as well. Things like our sex hormones like testosterone and estrogen. They really all come from cholesterol as a building block. So it's a super important item to have in the blood. But when it's too high in the blood, it starts to get stored in places that aren't very good, like our vasculature. And that's how we start to develop atherosclerosis, which again leads to all the problems that we kind of examine with the rest of this case study and throughout our reading this week. Next, really, we talk about diet. Again, you know, I once attended a lecture by a medical doctor who said the easiest way for somebody to lose weight is to close their mouth. And that is true. It's an incredibly simplified way to think about things. But in reality, if we wanted to get a little bit more specific about that, to lose weight really means we need to mobilize fats and use those as energy in the body. Now, if you're in true starvation, you mobilize protein, and that has problems with it, which is why, you know, eating is still important even when we try to lose weight. But the concept of needing to mobilize fats to then convert them to ATP for energy is true. And really the only way to do that is to ensure that there is an amount of glucose in the body and carbohydrate in general that is below a certain level. And once it's below a certain level, we start to see an increase in a process called beta oxidation, which is where fats are processed into ATP. And really, you know, people don't understand this that well, but you really lose weight by exhaling. So when that fat gets burned into ATP, think all the way back to your anatomy and physiology, it goes through glycolysis, the Krebs cycle, and then through the electronic transport chain and oxidative phosphorylation. What's the final end products of that, other than a couple random accessory molecules here and there? It's water and carbon dioxide, what we exhale out of our breath, right? We essentially lose weight by exhaling the fats after they are burned for energy. Okay, so that's a big concept to keep in mind related to this, and ultimately for health in general. Best way to lose weight is actually eating well and exercising. So moving on to our next question. All right, so our second and final question to cover, the only other one that scored below a 90% correct rate, is our patient discussed in the scenario at an elevated risk of developing coronary artery disease, peripheral artery disease, both, or neither? Explain. So, kind of already mentioned it, but our artery diseases really start with the idea of atherosclerosis and arteriosclerosis. Atherosclerosis is that artificial narrowing of the vasculature as essentially gunk, like cholesterol, builds up on the inside. And then arteriosclerosis is where, because of the inflammation that happens with the formation of the atheromas, the artery starts to harden, meaning our arteries have those three layers, which makes them different than our veins. The arteries have essentially that inner layer, they have that middle layer of muscle, and then they have their dense outer layer. And that middle layer of muscle is important to allow the vasculature of arteries to change size, and that helps control blood pressure and the rate of blood flow. As arteriosclerosis happens, we kind of lose that fine control of those functions. And that ultimately leads to a reduction in available oxygen downstream from where those plaques and where that restriction in vessel size is happening. And that's ultimately the very simplified basis of what coronary artery disease and peripheral artery disease are. The only real difference here is that they just occur in different pieces of anatomy. Okay? Coronary artery disease is specific to the heart. Peripheral artery disease is pretty much anywhere outside of the heart. They're pretty much the exact same condition. They have the same risk factors for the most part. And so if a patient is at risk of developing one, they're at risk of developing both. All right? And sometimes you'll get both. Sometimes you'll only get one. It really all depends. So that is everything for our week 4 case study. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask.